They're told low fat, high carb, counting calories, eat 6 times a day, over exercise, try to be as thin as possible. So many people are struggling with these eating disorders and they're just told that it's in your mind. The moment I ate more saturated fat, red meat, and ate enough food, it just stopped. They sell you something to fix a problem, but it's actually destroying your health. People, they think I've had a cheat day. That's my whole carnivore journey is ruined. Life is short. Why not be the best that you can and get the most out of life? He actually reversed heart failure. If you were to say that to doctors, they would be shocked. What you eat can actually make someone walk and they could not walk their whole entire life. It really just shows that this is a therapeutic, a protocol, and approach to health. The number one thing that fixed my eating disorder, changed my life, was the carnivore diet.
Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker here. Hey, if you or someone you love is suffering from chronic disease and you're tired of just managing symptoms with potions, pills, and procedures, I want you to check out Revero.com. Our team of dedicated professionals is committed to tackling the root cause of your issue and finally getting you healthy. Hurry up, though. Our spaces are filling up very quickly. All right, well, let's get started. So I'm with Rina from the Primal Podcast, and Rina, we've talked many times. I don't know, have I interviewed you before? I can't remember if I have. I know you've interviewed me multiple times, and I'm just trying to remember if I have or not. Did I?
So you actually interviewed me a few years ago when I first started, when I first started carnivore. Yeah, it was a long time ago.
That's what I thought. I just wasn't clear. I've done probably, gosh, I don't know how many, into the thousands now at this point. Okay, so let's start with a little bit about your history. You're a bit of a globetrotter. You were Australia, then you were in, I don't know, Croatia or something like that, or somewhere out there, and then you're in Dubai and Australia. So who are you? Who is Rina? Tell us who you are.
So it's a good question. I was thinking about how I would describe this because I think people, when they describe themselves, there's many aspects to their life, but pertaining to health and why I started the Primal Podcast and why I do what I do, it usually starts with our own health struggles. So I started with my own health struggle since I was about 20. But I can quite confidently say that thanks to you and the likes of Dr. Ken Berry, that the carnivore diet has just incredibly, completely changed my life. I think that a lot of people, when they start their health journey, they're told, low fat, high carb, counting calories, eat 6 times a day. And especially for women, over exercise, try to be as thin as possible. And that was definitely me, like when I started my health journey. And then about 5 years ago, I heard about the carnivore diet. I actually heard about it from Dr. Ken Berry. So not quite you just yet, but Dr. Ken Berry. And he did a video about eating beef, butter, bacon, and eggs and how that could heal different diseases and different problems. And for me, my problem was primarily an eating disorder, food addiction issues, depression, anxiety, mood issues, social anxiety, all these different things. And then quite quickly after starting a carnivore diet, it just completely fixed. And I would say that would be in a few months' time. I started about August of 2020. After that, another life-changing thing happened in my life. My dad was diagnosed with a terminal brain disease, dementia. So he got actually diagnosed 5 years ago. And then his doctor that he was seeing actually put him on the wrong medication, an Alzheimer's medication, which fast forwarded his decline quite rapidly. So now he's in an aged care facility and he can't move, he can't eat, he can't do anything for himself. I get quite emotional when I tell this story because that's the reason why I traveled and why I did more with my life, because my dad said to me, Rina, go live your life. So the combination, which is what you say, which is, what we eat is so important for our health, but moving, being around people, the stress component, sleeping well, it really combines itself to have a great life. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I interview people like you. That's why I interview people not just in the carnivore space, but also in the ketogenic space and the low carb space, because I appreciate that not everyone can do carnivore. Not everyone needs to do carnivore, but diet definitely plays a crucial role in our health and our overall happiness.
Yeah, and that's very well stated. I want to go back to the eating disorder part, because this is something, a lot of people will say, well, carnivore is just an eating disorder. I mean, I hear this all the time. And then when I look at, what are the critical definitions of an eating disorder, it's usually something that results in negative health outcomes. I mean, this is, you look at any eating disorder, you look at binge eating disorder, nighttime eating disorder, anorexia, bulimia. Some people would argue orthorexia, things like that. But what was your eating disorder? Do you mind sharing what you were struggling with from an eating disorder standpoint? Because, let's just go there and then we can see how that evolves.
Sure. So what I experienced was called night eating syndrome. So it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
anorexia, bulimia, or anything. I don't know if you've heard about that, but for those that
Yeah.
haven't heard, it's when you wake up in the middle of the night. You're conscious, but you have this unconscious control of overeating foods. And it tends to be like a typical dinner or a lunch. And then the next day, you are so full that you just can't eat. And then that habit happens over time. The tendency that I had was to gain weight, but then I'd over exercise to lose weight. The foods that I was eating obviously was not nutrient dense. So I think that is part of the reason why the carnivore diet worked for me. And it's quite interesting that you say, people call the carnivore diet another eating disorder. One thing I've noticed with my group is that for many women that have tried different diets and different ways of eating just to achieve optimal health, other people say to them that they have an eating disorder. This is just another diet that you're on, and they don't give it the true credit that it actually deserves as a therapeutic protocol to heal all these chronic issues. Eating disorders are a big thing. So many people focus on obesity, and that's the biggest problem worldwide. But so many people are struggling with these eating disorders, and they're just told that it's in your mind. They're just told that eat healthier. They're just told other things, but it doesn't focus on the root cause, which in my mind is nutrient density. If you eat a nutrient dense diet, the moment I ate more saturated fat, red meat, and ate enough food, it just stopped. The moment I did that, everything else changed because my mindset changed. I started moving more. I started being more positive. So it's a whole holistic view and perspective, but it starts from what you eat. So that's how I changed.
Yeah, I think the nutrition aspect is a fundamental, pillar, column, which what have you, a base of your health. And without that, it's so it's a three-legged stool, one of the stools removed in many ways. So when you had this, nighttime eating syndrome or nighttime diseating or disorder, whatever it was called, that was formally diagnosed by physician, psychiatrist, eating disorder specialist, and what was the treatment that was rendered onto you?
So it wasn't diagnosed. I actually found it out myself by finding a book called Night Eating Syndrome, and I was trying to find all the symptoms that I was having because through that time, and this happened in my early 20s, because part of it is I was over exercising. As I said, I was doing like a high carb, low fat diet, and then that developed over time in my early 20s. So at that time, I saw psychologists, I saw a psychiatrist. They put me on Zoloft. They said I had depression. They said I have a mental health disorder, and that's why you're doing this unconscious eating behavior. They said I need to eat more food. They said live a healthier life. And then I just didn't get any of the answers. And they put me on a mental health program,
Mhm.
which was quite ridiculous. And nobody understood what was happening. And then it was just this constant overeating, restricting, being on that medication, which, by the way, if anyone's been on Zoloft or any of those SSRI medications, it can definitely help, but it doesn't it just helps to a certain point that you don't have the inner anxiety or the shame, which is associated with an eating disorder. It's like anxiety doesn't just come from anxiety comes from many different things, but part of it can be that underlying problem, which is the eating disorder. So I was just
Ye-
on medications, and no one helped me at all.
Yeah, I mean and this is what we often see. We see somebody with a problem and we don't have really good solutions for it. It might be something like chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia or one of these things, and we'll say, maybe you're just depressed, throw you on an SSRI or some other mental health drug and placate you with that when we're really not really going after the root cause. And interestingly, both eating disorders and anxiety have now been tested well, there's been case series that have come out that have been published, in both of those conditions and have shown that a carnivore diet, ketogenic style carnivore diet particularly, has been incredibly powerful in reversing and completely resolving those issues. And just in in the context of anorexia. Anorexia is one of the most lethal eating disorders in a lot of women, and it's really hard to recover from. And many women actually succumb to that, actually die from their eating disorder, which is just, it's tragic to see that. And so, and I've talked to women that have overcome anorexia with a carnivore diet, and the conventional treatment, often like inpatient treatment, was basically kind of lock them up and force feed them cookies. I mean, really, I'm kind of oversimplifying, but essentially, they try to desensitize you and say there are no bad foods, and you can't leave the room until you eat this cupcake, and just kind of breaking them down and feeding them garbage along the way, which is horrible for their overall anxiety and mental health outlook. So, when did you decide? You saw Ken's work and some of my work, presumably, and decide, hey, I'm going to do this carnivore thing. And obviously it's helped you, or you wouldn't be here talking about this. But at what point did you decide, hey, I know you said that, the story with your father, but at what point did you decide, hey, I want to share this with as many people as I can? And you've got, I think it was like the 5-minute body or something. I remember seeing little snippets, and you've quickly gotten quite a large number of views and followers and stuff like that. So kudos to you for that. But when did you decide that was what you wanted to do?
I would say that people could have that definitive moment, but for me, it really wasn't. I actually started 5-minute body as an exercise because I was really into exercise. And then, as I said, I started the carnivore diet and I switched my content towards doing just about, hey, I just tried a carnivore diet for 30 days. And I saw it got a lot of views and I was like, oh, okay, that's quite interesting. And then I just started, as you do, if you have content that is quite interesting, you kind of do more of that content. I didn't think the carnivore diet was anything big or anything, especially for women. But then my audience, I mean, it tends to be men as well, but it tends to be women as well that are really aligned with fixing a lot of health issues, whether it's overt health issues, but also mental health issues. They try to lose weight and everything like that. But that's really why I started. I started doing carnivore videos, what I eat in a day, and all these different things. But then I started doing interviews with carnivore success stories, kind of like you're doing now. That kind of branched out to doing a more ketogenic style. Because as I was interviewing a lot of doctors, they were talking about a ketogenic diet and even some doing a low carb diet. And that was just quite fascinating to me because I realized the biggest challenge with a carnivore diet is, as you said, consistency and being on a carnivore diet the long term. Not many people have the desire to do carnivore. I have the desire, you have the desire, many people watching have the desire, but the broader people out there, if you want to help them, having a larger message, which was having more of a primal ancestral way of eating, hence the primal podcast, would help just the majority of people. Also bearing in mind that different cultures, they don't have a meat-centric culture and they do have a lot of carbohydrates in their life, me being from an Indian background. So to kind of help a lot more people and just from my own learning, I really branched it out to being more ketogenic, low carb with that still carnivore focus. And that's where the Primal podcast came in. And then I got fascinated with stories because every single person has a different story, or there's something so interesting about our healthcare system. And it's so interesting that different companies and products, like even mouthwash, they sell you something to fix a problem, but it's actually destroying your health. So as you would know with my mouthwash, it destroys your nitric oxide, which causes vasoconstriction, which causes high blood pressure. Everybody uses mouthwash. So when people find all this information, not just about carnivore diet, but about health, they're just fascinated and want to improve their own health. So that's where my passion comes from.
Yeah, it's interesting how you pivoted from a more of an exercise focus to more of a nutrition focus. And and obviously I came to attention through nutrition, and I enjoy exercise. And so I'm always putting up me exercise, but I really like to hopefully inspire and encourage people to exercise and push their body. And, it's not just getting healthy, but it's in what do you do with it? And I think it's clearly a part of people that exercise, that get stronger, I think lead, healthier lives in general. Not everybody, it's not everybody's cup of tea, obviously, but, because there's a lot of like demonization about exercise, like, well, exercise isn't going to help with fat loss and it's irrelevant, or it's going to make you hungry and you're going to eat more. And while there are some truths to those sort of thoughts, the overall benefit of exercise outweighs any negatives in my view, particularly if done dosed appropriately and done with the correct, intensity and frequency. And so like I said, I, like you, understand that, and I've said this I think I've said this from the beginning, not everybody needs to be on a carnivore diet to be healthy. I mean, it's clear there's plenty of healthy people that aren't carnivorous. But it is, in my view, it is unmatched as a therapeutic tool for certain conditions. I mean, I think it's just a thing. And you're right. Not everybody does it forever, and I'm the first guy to say, hey, every once in a while I'll have something that's not carnivorous, but it's extremely rare. And it's not like I'm planning every weekend I have a cheat meal, or, because when I was on a ketogenic diet for a number of years, and I did experiment with that, I would have regular carb refeeds, and it just didn't help me. And arguably it made me worse. Every time I did it, I didn't feel good. I was just like, I don't see the benefit here, even as an athlete. And I'm very much in tune with my athletic performance. I that's one of the metrics that I have always judged myself. And I've got, I know where my performance has been over the years, and know when I'm better, know when I'm worse, and know where I am relative to where I was at, say, 50 and 45 and 37, or whatever the metrics I want to look at. So exercise is my thing, my evolution, I suppose, back to where I've always been, and hopefully I can bring some more people with me. Do you, anytime, I mean, this is like being a politician in many ways. I mean, well, I don't know. Let me just be more clear on this. I think the intent for both you and I is generally to do good, to generally help people. And our methodology by which we do so, carnivore, low carb, keto, whatever, exercise in my case, some people disagree with that. So in fact, some people think we're actually harming people by recommending you eat more meat, or so on and so forth. And it becomes almost like politics, in that it's very much, you're an awful person. You're a the current, I hate to see the dynamics between the political left and right, as one's a bunch of Nazis and the other one are a bunch of pedophiles. And it's like, it's just they're always the most extreme worst of the worst, when really most people are kind of in the middle. And I think, whenever I have discussions with people that are polar opposite of me on nutritional beliefs, vegan, for instance, we always agree with about 80% of the stuff. We're like, hey man, let's cut out the ultra processed food. Hey, let's exercise, let's move more, let's get good sleep. And it's just those edge issues, but it's so polarizing. And I see some of the stuff you put out there, and I get social media. I mean, the headlines are the controversial things. You put something out there and said, this is the top thing that's going to save your life, or never do this. And people want to see, and you're just competing with another 50,000 other people that are trying to say the same thing. So you have to stand apart. Do you get a lot of negativity? Does that attract a lot of negativity on your end? I mean, I don't know. I mean, because you said you come from an Indian background, as you know, much of India, particularly the Hindu population, very tend to lean vegetarian. There's obvious cultural and religious restrictions around things like beef, particularly in certain parts of India. I think particularly in the north, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm mistaken on that. But anyway, do you get a lot of blowback or anything like that?
So pertaining to YouTube and social media, it depends on the video. So like, for example, the interview that we did yesterday, when that comes out, you're going to have a lot of carnivore people that have said, you know what, carnivore has changed my life, and ShawnBaker is the one that changed my life. That's going to be the comment. And then you're going to have other people that might negate some things that you have said. That might be negative, or I don't believe that kind of thing. So on a carnivore video, generally it's quite positive. They love carnivore. When I have something that is a bit broader, so say for example, I had Dr. William Davis, and he's about gut health and the microbiome, and he was talking about a certain yogurt that is going to fix your gut health, and you have to put inulin, and you have people that will say negative things about that, and it's because I find they have something that works for them, even if they're carnivore or low carb or they eat meat. And then if they hear something that is a bit opposite to what they believe in, or it's different to what's consistent with carnivore, if that makes sense, like the introduction of any vegetable or fiber, carnivores generally don't like that. I try to open up that picture in terms of saying, okay, for most people that are carnivore, the reason that why it works is because it's a therapeutic option. So you're taking away the things that don't work for you and your gut health and fiber. Do we need fiber? Go into all those conversations. So usually with those people, it's kind of like a misunderstanding. They hear something, they want to give their opinion. I don't really get a lot of comments around from vegans and vegetarians. I don't know why. I don't get a lot of negativity around that meat is going to kill you. I think part of that reason is because the way I position it is meat is a meat centric diet, and not trying to oppose that a vegan diet doesn't work or a vegetarian diet doesn't work. Because I always come to the conclusion is that how do we know what we do works? Because humans try to have an absolute answer for things, but at the end of the day, we're all just trying to understand what is working based on science and on the evolutionary evidence. And everyone, if you're a vegetarian, you'll think that works. If you're a vegan, you'll think that works. If you're an omnivore, you think that works. The consensus and the theme is that whole unprocessed foods with an emphasis of animal-based protein with the amino acids and the essential fatty acids is what is needed for health. So I don't get negative comments about that. Pertaining to family, my family is actually a very meat-centric diet, meat-centric focus. So they love meat. Where the negativity comes in is you're only going to live once. Why don't you eat some vegetables, or why don't you eat some carbs, or have some cake? And I think the way I have responded to that is by just being a success of my personal story. I used to try to debate them. I used to try to say, no, but you have to listen to this person. Look at what ShawnBaker's talking about here. He's an expert. Can I tell you, they don't know who you are. I don't know why, but they don't know who you are. So when you try to say these carnivore and ketogenic people, the broader community, if you want to change them to the way that you're eating, they don't know who you are. So they're not going to, listen to what you say. So by being a success and just being quite quiet about your journey, but showing your health, showing your happiness, showing your strength is enough to do it for yourself. And then for some people, it's enough to convert them towards healthier way of eating, which involves meat, lowering the carbohydrates, and for some, zero carbs.
Yeah, I mean, you only live once thing, and then you should eat broccoli, because I don't know that would, I wouldn't understand that argument, quite honestly, because if I never ate broccoli again the rest of my life, I would not miss it remotely. But yeah, yeah, most people have never heard of me. Most people never will hear of me. I mean, it's, uh, I think there's very few people on earth where they have that level of fame where, Muhammad Ali, Donald Trump, I didn't name Joe Rogan, probably a lot of people in Europe don't even have any idea who Rogan is. I mean, there's very few people that transcend that level of notoriety. So that's, and if they're not interested in that, I mean, there's just things that don't interest me. To be honest, most people, diet doesn't interest them, because most people's decision making when it comes around food is, number one, how does it taste? And then secondarily, usually it's how much does it cost? And that's what drives most of the nutritional decisions, here and I'm sure other places. What has been, as someone who was probably, at some point, night eating syndrome, maybe Australia seems like they've had some very outspoken plant-based advocates. It seems like, I don't know, maybe it's just what filters down to me. Had you ever considered that, or do you have a sense? My sense is, and maybe it's because I'm an American and what I see in the United States, you bring a different perspective, is that there is a shift in society that's going away from that sort of plant-based momentum has slowed, if not reversed a little bit. Is that palpable to you and maybe Australia, but just, man on the street type of stuff, or do you have any notice of that?
Um, I think it's still a lot kind of plant-based, because you see a lot of people having acai bowl. So I'm in Bondi right now, which is kind of like the mainstay in Sydney, close to the beach. You see a lot of women, especially having these acai bowls, paying 25 Australian dollars for acai bowls. I mean,
Mm.
why don't you just have a ribeye or a steak? So there is that kind of still not that push. However, when it comes to the guidelines here, when you speak to a doctor, there's definitely that focus on lower saturated fat, more of that Mediterranean diet. So not vegan or vegetarian, but more of the Mediterranean diet. Interestingly, I was vegetarian for about 9 months,
Mhm.
and I was not eating meat. I was having fish and eggs for the majority of my time, even outside of being vegetarian. I think that's what also contributed towards the eating disorder, and then also the mood disorders. I shouldn't call it mood disorder because it's not a mood disorder, depression, anxiety.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the Mediterranean, because I've been to several Mediterranean countries, and there was no lack of meat. Each time I've been, whether it was on the Spanish coast, the Mediterranean coast of Spain, or Greece, or Italy, Croatia. I mean, all these countries, south of France, there's meat everywhere. It's not like, and red meat too, lamb, beef. Certainly there's some fish. There's some vegetables as well, but I mean, and a lot of cheese. I mean, God, there's a lot of cheese and stuff like that. So when I look at the U.S. version of the Mediterranean diet, it doesn't really match with the Mediterranean. I don't think the Mediterranean diet is sort of monolithic. I mean, it's very varied depending upon what region you're from, and so it's interesting. And certainly some of them value their meat. They eat the heck out of it. They certainly enjoy it. Have you? So with regard to this night eating syndrome, do you think carnivore cured that? Do you think? Was that the cure for you? Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker here. Hey, if you or someone you love is suffering from chronic disease and you're tired of just managing symptoms with potions, pills, and procedures, I want you to check out Revero.com. Our team of dedicated professionals is committed to tackling the root cause of your issue and finally getting you healthy. Hurry up, though. Our spaces are filling up very quickly.
Absolutely. 100%. As I said when I first started, the number one thing, and I say that to people, the number one thing that fixed my eating disorder, changed my life, was the carnivore diet. I think people like to say that just because it sounds good. That is the one thing. Meat and fat changed my diet. And the absence of the sugars, the processed foods, anything artificial. I used to binge on stevia and peanut butter, which is considered very healthy. But when you have these food addiction tendencies, eating disorder tendencies, these things that are classed as healthy, that you're told are healthy, they're not foods that you can actually moderate. And I think that people need to take it quite seriously if you're speaking to somebody, because an eating disorder you can't necessarily see. As a general statement, you can see that someone is quite slim or thin unless they are anorexic, which I'm saying for that condition is very, very hard. My sister also suffered with the same problem. But it's not something that you can overtly see. So when you go through this treatment protocol, and it is a treatment protocol for a carnivore diet because it's not just a diet, the way that we eat dictates how our mitochondria functions, our cell functions, our brain functions. So if anyone thinks that the way that you eat is just out of convenience, it's absolute, crap. It doesn't work, because why do you exercise and move? You want a particular stimulus to promote muscle growth, to promote mitochondrial function so that you have better health. People that just kind of go for a walk and do these gentle exercises and, these long form cardios, but really what you want is to elicit that response. Diet is something, exercise is also another thing. So when it comes to, I actually forgot your question because I was going off a different tangent. What's your
Well, I
question
was just
again?
asking about carnivore curing the
Yes, it cured
nighttime
it.
eating disorder.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I think I just get so passionate about this because whatever problem you have, if it's diabetes, mental health conditions, obesity, if it's high blood pressure, autoimmune conditions, thyroid conditions, diet plays such an integral role. And the carnivore diet, I have not seen one person coming to even my carnivore group, probably even your carnivore group, that with a carnivore diet has not completely reversed it, fixed it, or helped the problem, depending on how consistent they are with the diet. So as a therapeutic protocol, it 100% cured my night eating syndrome. And when you cure and when you fix and you eat all the nutrient dense foods, it fixes everything else. That's my belief.
Yeah, I think that, and this is the thing that sometimes is a little frustrating, because you'll see people that will go on a carnivore diet and they will cure one of their own diseases. And then maybe they move on to something else and they say, well, they transition to something. And then they start criticizing the carnivore diet because of XYZ issue. And they're like, it literally changed your life for the better. And maybe not everybody's in the same position, because I would argue that you can get very metabolically healthy on this diet. You can cure food addictions. You can put diseases in remission. And then you might be allowed some more flexibility down the road. But to come back and turn around and say that was the wrong thing, you may have never gotten there if you went straight to what you're on now. If you would have went straight to the, whatever diet it is, a repeat diet where you eat a bunch of sugar without going through carnivore first. And so I think for many people it is a necessary step. And I do see a lot of people that will experiment, which I think everybody certainly has. It's their own prerogative if they want to do that. They'll do it for a while and they'll say, you know what, it wasn't better, and I feel better on a more stricter version. And maybe not like, and I'm very much not dogmatic about it. I'm not the guy that's going to yell at somebody for having, a cup of blueberries a couple times a week or something like that. I don't really care. It's up to them, whatever works for them. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that, you either face personally in this space or that you see that your people that you often contact deal with?
The biggest problem in the community that I have is for people to be consistent. And I hear you say the same thing, that the number one thing that you need to be successful on the diet is to be consistent. And the way that you be consistent is most likely to have a support. So, support of a doctor that understands the lifestyle, but also support of people around you doing the same thing. So, that's the main challenge, because I always say to people that you have to understand, this sounds great. Carnivore diet is not hard. How hard is it to eat a ribeye? How hard is it to eat ground beef and eggs? Not hard. The challenge is that when you live in a society where over 90% of the population is metabolically damaged, where over 100% of the times 100% of the times you go out, there's processed foods, there's sugars, because that's cheap to sell you. If you ever go to a restaurant and you understand the cost of the food they're giving you, it's cheap, but you're paying high prices for labor costs, for everything that you shouldn't pay for. But how much is meat? You're never going to get enough meat when you go to a restaurant unless you pay probably about 3 times the price of what you pay for if you actually go out. So the main challenge for other people is a consistency. The main challenge for me, I would say, in my personal lifestyle, because I travel, would be the consistency because of the availability of good quality meat. So, for example, when I was in Europe and in Switzerland, meat was just expensive, really expensive. I mean, a coffee was a 10 Australian dollars, and that's just a black coffee. But when you buy meat and even the ground beef, so the ground beef is a cheaper option. They had ingredients like celery, carrot, preservatives, additives, all these things to make the meat taste nice. And I was thinking that's probably because people in Europe, they don't tend to eat a lot of red meat. They tend to lean on vegetables and kind of fish and white meat. But I thought maybe it's to make the meat more appetizing. So the challenge would be to source meats for me when I travel, which is not a big deal. But for other people, it's mostly being consistent. It's a big deal, especially people, they think I've had a cheat day. That's my whole carnivore journey is ruined. Oh my goodness. Um, so I would say celebrating the lifestyle with people, understanding what you're doing is a therapeutic option for health. It's not a diet. It's not a quick win thing. It is a lifestyle thing. And you can graduate from carnivore to including carbohydrates. You don't have to do carnivore for forever. Doing it for 90 days. Try it for 90 days. It's 90 days out of your whole life. People say that, life is short. Why be restrictive? Life is short. Why not be the best that you can and get the most out of life? Getting the most out of life is having the best health. Why not give carnivore a try? But get the support from having people around you, whether it's listening to people like Dr. ShawnBaker, being in a community, get people that are doing the same thing.
Yeah, that it goes back to something called the Ash experiment. That back in the day, the psychological experiments where they would put people in a room and one person would be the test and everybody else would be in on it, and they would show these people, a picture, and everybody in the room would get it wrong, and the one person that was like, "You guys are all wrong," but they would repeatedly do that, and then eventually the person would just agree with all the wrong people because they're like, "Well, I don't want to stick out." So you just kind of follow the herd in many ways. And so if the herd is, shoving popcorn in their face at the movie theater and eating, junk food and swilling down, Coca-Colas, it's going to be easy to do that. And you don't want to stick out in many ways. People, sometimes don't like, we don't like negative attention on us. We sometimes like to blend in. It's this kind of pack instinct that we have in some cases. And it takes a little bit of courage to be willing to stick out. So for those people that don't quite have as much courage, sometimes having that group around you makes things a little easier. It's just more, you can kind of relax. Some people feel like they're on edge. And I tell people, hey, if you go to a restaurant and you're with a bunch of people that don't know what you eat like and you want to bring attention to yourself, the last thing you're going to do is just order a steak on your If you just come out and there's a steak on your plate and nothing else there, people are going to start asking questions. But if you tell them, hey, just put a piece of broccoli on there and you just don't eat it, it's just there as a decoy, no one will even pay a mind to you. But as soon as they just get that sort of, this sort of overall impression something's wrong here, they just kind of generally screen looking around. Oh, this guy's got something different going on. Let me go investigate that. So you put that decoy piece of broccoli on your plate or something, and then it's like people leave you alone. Do you find, personally, have you had any significant negatives by going carnivore? Were there any big negatives that affected you?
Good question. When I first started, I wasn't eating red meat. So I was still having a lot of white meat. And then I started eating lean red meat because I was scared about eating fatty red meat. Basically, that's a long way to say that my hair started falling out. And I started to get the negative side effects of not eating enough and not eating enough protein, because I went down the trap of, and we spoke about yesterday, the high fat protocol. But I thought that was high fat, like 60 grams of protein or 70 grams of protein, then 150 grams of fat or 170 grams of fat. And what we're talking about here is the macros of protein to fat ratios. So in that process of under eating protein, I was having a lot of hair loss. My skin was feeling a bit more drier. And that would be, I would say, the main side effect or negative result. And sometimes not eating enough as well. And then you find that your energy is less. And that is typically from not eating enough fat, because if you're not having the carbs, your energy comes from fat. So you better eat enough fat. Most people, they say, eat the fat that's in the meat. And I know for you that works perfectly. But as we spoke about yesterday on my podcast, typically for women, people that have food addiction issues, central nervous system issues, particularly eating a bit higher fat, for me, adding the extra fat is so beneficial and so vital for me to be consistent on the lifestyle, and then not have the negative side effects, but also having enough protein. That is very important.
Yeah, I think those are fair statements. And I do think there is a differential requirement for more or less fat. I think everybody on a carnivore diet is generally on a higher fat diet than standard. I mean, standard diet is about 30% fat by calorie, and that's pretty lean meat if you think about it. I mean, you got to be eating pretty lean to get under 30% by calorie. So fat becomes important. There are people that overconsume fat, as we talked about. I'm not the stick of butter guy. I'm
No.
not necessarily demonizing butter, but I think there's a point where you can go a little overboard on that sometimes. Some people do fine with it, but many people don't. You said you're, I guess, off to Dubai. When does that start? That's coming up in the near future, right?
That's in mid-May, yes.
Mid-May. So
But first
excited
going
about that.
to Malaysia, to Kuala Lumpur for a week, and then Dubai.
Okay, yeah, I've been to I did a lecture there in Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur one year. There's a nice big giant, I think, Buddhist temple statue somewhere. It's a little hike. It's worth probably checking out. I thought it was pretty cool. A lot of monkeys running around there, and the monkeys will sometimes steal stuff from people.
Yes, I heard. Don't put your phone out because they're going to steal
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So I saw those little monkeys there, and they're not shy. They come up to people.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was an enjoyable trip. That was a time when I actually got to debate a couple of vegans in real life, which is fun, and it was very cordial and nice. So the Dubai for 1 year is just, as I think you said, obviously there's some nice things about living in Dubai. What is the purpose going to be, and why only 1 year? Is it just I want to explore the world, like you said? Your dad said, "Hey, go see the world." Is that part of that?
Yeah. So back when my dad was still at home, so he wasn't in his aged care facility, I really was toying with the fact of, should I go or should I not go? It took me a few months to even think about it. And my husband now, who then wasn't my husband at the time, he was actually moving overseas for his business. And then I asked my dad, because I thought, should I stay with my dad or should I, you know, um, go travel and live my life? And he said, Rina, and this was the time that he could talk. So imagine now he can't talk. The only thing that he can do is moan, basically.
Hmm.
But he did say, Rena, go live your life. And then from that point onward, I quit my job, sold my properties, which I had. I had a little dog. So I gave him away to a beautiful different owner. And I just made that decision to travel. In the last 2.5 years, we've lived in 14 different countries, 14
Mhm.
different countries, and we've just experienced so much. So when people say getting back to carnivore, well, I cannot be carnivore, it's too hard. I'm like, really? Well, I can travel the world and still be carnivore and still, have awesome health and still be active and have a great life. So Dubai, it's really, I mean, we love Dubai, the hot weather, the experience. It's really good because it's next to Europe as well. So just to live there, it's a good time zone as well for the US. Being in Australia, not the best for the US, but again,
Mhm.
traveling there. But the idea is to stay there for a year, but also travel to Europe and come back. It's always good to have a base. So we're thinking that Dubai might be our base and that we can travel to Europe, even go back to Canada, maybe even the US, and then just travel back and forth.
Yeah, so you said 14 places. Did you have any particular favorites, and how hard were they differentially to do carnivore?
Particular places, Valencia, which is kind of the south of Spain, is
Yeah,
beautiful.
I've
Dubai is
been
also
there.
one of my favorites. Yeah, it's awesome. It's pretty easy because if you go out, you just go to a steakhouse. The thing about being carnivore is just your mindset to want to be carnivore because there's so much other food out there. So it's your decision to say, hey, where's the steak? Hey, where's the eggs? Some people get very particular on, I can't have my eggs cooked in a certain oil, or, I mean, that's going to happen, but how often does it happen? So the main thing is to do the best that you can. Focus on the meat, the ruminant meats. You're not going to go wrong. It's pretty easy. Let me think. The hardest one was Portugal because they just have a lot of seafood and a lot of fish. They don't
Mhm.
honestly. I could not find. If you just go to most places, they don't have red meat. You have to go find a place that has red meat. But if you go to another place, like say for example Spain, they have a lot of red meat. It's much easier, but in Portugal they had a lot more seafood, vegetables. Oh, it wasn't that great.
I've been to Portugal a few times, I know some people that are there, and they know how to find meat. So I guess you just got to know somebody there, and they can direct you to the places. And if you go, obviously, if you can cook at home, you can always go to the markets, and they've got fresh meat and stuff like that. I think the prices there, because wherever I go, I always like to pop into a grocery store and just go look for their meat prices, just to get a sense of what it is. And generally, they're close to U.S. prices in general. It's usually euros per kilo or whatever it is, Australian dollars per kilo, and it's comparable. But then you say, what's the standard of living and what's the average wage there? Then it's probably more expensive compared to what American and like Switzerland, as you mentioned, extremely expensive. Excuse me. As is like Norway. I think Norway is another place that's ridiculous. I've not been, but I've just heard it's ridiculously expensive. Whereas, like, I think I heard like places like Poland, Romania, meat is it's cheap by our standard or my standards anyway, U.S. standards, and you can probably get pretty good feast. But again, you got to compare that to the cost of living. Um, wow. All right. So off to Dubai. So no plans for changing what you're doing. This is kind of your thing, is you're going to be hosting podcasts and having communities, and that still stays the same, correct?
Pretty much, yeah. Focusing on the role of what we eat to fix our health. The biggest thing that we do, or I do, is to just focus on better health with an animal centric approach. But also, I want to branch out to other topics, not just food and not just what we eat, because there's other things that are quite interesting, like mindset. As you said, the exercise. Muscle as the muscle is the most important organ for longevity. So I think more people need to exercise more, including myself. And that would be a particular interest for the future. And just doing anything else, speaking at live conferences, being on carnival panels, all those different things are very exciting. So yeah, having the community, having people like you on the community is awesome as well. So
Yeah, I think that, and certainly, and I always, when it comes to the longevity argument or concerns, I always tell people I don't know, because I don't think anybody really knows. So I'm hesitant to start making proclamations about this is going to make you live longer. This going to be, but I do very much concern myself with quality of life and function, and there's clear things, and I think there's probably a fairly direct relationship between having a good quality of life and living longer. I mean, obviously, there's going to be people that drop dead for whatever reason, but I think in general, if you take people that are highly functional physically and mentally, they're probably going to outlive those people that are struggling in those areas. I mean, I think that's a probably reasonable bet that I would be willing to probably bet, but there's, without guarantees on that. So, the mindset stuff is interesting. I think it's like you, I'm interested in a whole host of things that I think, and, like I said, I've got these very specific performance goals as I approach, there's milestones in your life. I don't know how old you are, but as I hit 50 seems to be a big one. And I hit 50 and I was like, this is no big thing. And I was still able to perform it. So next one's 60. And that's a, and then it'll be 70 and then 80 and hopefully 80 and well, who knows, you never know how much time you have, but try to maximize the most of that. And do you, how does because you said you have a relatively new husband. Is he into all this stuff? Is he like, go Rina, or is he like this, whatever, you do your thing? Or is he into the nutrition and all that stuff too?
That's a very good question. Again, that's what I was saying, that when you kind of are a success story, other people tend to follow. So I've been with so we actually got married here. We got married in front of my dad because we just thought that he would just be so happy to see, because I also have a sister. My dad saw my sister get married 10 years ago. And we just thought that it would be so nice for him to see us getting married. So we had a small ceremony at his aged care facility. So my husband, he has turned more carnivore. Sometimes he does have a bit more cucumber and vegetables. He has a bit of cheese, which is, technically carnivore. But as I speak to more carnivores, as he sees all the success with carnivore, there's definitely that interest in health, and what you eat is so important for your health, and that focus on eating high fat, relatively high fat and red meat is so important for the overall health. And he's also seen that, his parents and other people getting diseases, people that are our age. So I'm 41, he's 42. People that even in our age, they're getting diseases. They have all these different problems, and he doesn't want that. So when he sees all the success that you have and other people have and I've had as well, it helps him along his way. He doesn't have any food addiction issues, no problems. He actually had acid reflux. About 10 years ago, he saw a doctor. The doctor said, I just want you to eat meat. So he was actually doing carnivore way back when, didn't know that it was carnivore. Within a year, his acid reflux completely disappeared. He was off all the medications. His acid reflux was that bad that he would faint from the pain that it caused just by eating meat. But he thought carnivore was eating chicken. He just ate chicken. I was like, well, how did you just eat chicken for a year? So I just ate chicken. I just ate chicken and yogurt. I was like, well, yogurt's not technically carnivore, but it fixed it. So it's quite interesting.
I think you might have asked this to me. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. I think you might have. But so you've been, obviously you host a little carnivore group. I've spoken in there, I think a couple times maybe. You get exposed to some really, really crazy stuff, like just things that just blow you away that they get better. What would be your favorite, if you have one, or you can think of something that really is just really shocked you as to how someone got better because of changing their diet?
Good question. Two stories that really stand out. One was his name was Richard. Is Richard. He was diagnosed with heart failure at the age of 25. He was on medications for his entire life. He did carnivore, I think it was for about 14 months. I'm not 100% sure if it was 14 months. His heart failure that he was told was genetic or something can't go away, completely reversed with a carnivore diet. He didn't do a lion diet. He didn't go very, very strict. He just had a lot of red meat, just doing a typical carnivore diet. It completely reversed. And now he has so much more energy. And I've got a picture of him before sitting with cords going to his heart. He was frail. He was weak. And now he's just a picture of energy. He's exercising. He's got so much energy. He's got so much health in him. And he actually reversed heart failure. If you were to say that to doctors, they would be shocked. The second story is Doug. I think Doug is about 31. He's got multiple sclerosis, and you've probably seen this with your people and patients that you see. He said to me, and he shared on the group recently, that he hasn't been able to stand up and walk in 31 years. And recently, since he's been doing the carnivore diet, he was able to stand up for 10 seconds and walk a little bit before he had to sit down. And I think the community just had this tearful moment, because when you understand the impact that what you eat can actually make someone walk, and they could not walk their whole entire life, it really just shows that this is a therapeutic protocol and approach to health.
Yeah, I've seen similar stories, and it just, it allows me to take all the naysayers and the critics and the people that have bad things to say about me, either me personally or the diet, and just say, I'll put it in perspective. If you don't like it, no one's forcing you to do this, but this is literally life changing and life giving to so many people that we should just say, hey, look, you do you, I'll do me, and let's all hope for the best. But I mean, there's people that are just so vehemently opposed to anyone eating in a way that doesn't align with their particular belief system or desires, or whatever it might be. And so, yeah, I mean, that's really amazing. And, I mean, uh, I guess, his name was Doug, the guy that was able to walk again. You would ask him, how valuable is that to him? And I'm sure he would say, look, this is the greatest gift I've ever had, or something similar to that, perhaps. Maybe, I mean, if you have a kid, that's a pretty big gift or something. But I mean, it's like, it's really powerful. And then you say, well, but your risk for heart disease may have gone up a little bit. 10 times out of 10, those people say, I'm happy to take that swap. I mean, that's what I see. And I think as a physician, it is my job to impose a belief system on someone, or even tell them what's important to them. They need to be just educated and informed and make their own decisions. And I think most of them, again, when you're faced with a life of suffering, misery, pain, disability, and that's no longer, and that goes away. I mean, I've seen a number of people say this about, people have lots of dreams, but if you're sick, you've got one dream. You dream about not being sick anymore. And a lot of times this is what carnivore has done for many people, or some of these other diets, to be fair. Well, Rina, this has been fun. Obviously, yeah, I think I'm sure we'll be talking again. Hopefully meet in live and in person at some point. I'm sure we will at some
Absolutely. I'll be
point. So,
super excited to see you in person. Yes.
yeah, that'd be great. So anyway, I guess for those people that don't follow you, don't know, tell us just some of your like social media stuff and places they can find you.
Sure. So I'm on YouTube under the Primal Podcast, Instagram and Twitter as well, same name. The community that we have is Go Carnivore. So we have doctors like the wonderful Dr. ShawnBaker that joins us to answer questions, and also we have these fun challenges each month: dairy free, or the salt challenge, or the line diet challenge, just to make it fun to stay on carnivore. And then, as I mentioned, we also have a tallow product that we have launched. It's called the Primal Tallow Face and Body Balm. So all different things that we're doing to celebrate carnivore, but really to improve and help people improve their health.
All right. Well, good for you. Thanks for being on. Appreciate it. And we'll talk soon. Thanks, Rina.
Thanks, Dr. Baker. Bye.